What's up, everybody? Welcome back to How to Be a Boss, the podcast. I am Robert Carden Jr.
I'm Christy Brinson.
And I'm Seth Sheely.
So listen, before we get into today's episode, we just want to let you guys know about something new that we're doing over here at How to Be a Boss. It's podcast at aat.team. Feel free to email us. We want to hear from you guys, whether it be your business questions, life advice you may need, or you just want to let us know what you think about the show. We want to hear from you guys, and we are going to respond to you on future episodes. So again, it's podcast at aat.team. We want to hear from you guys.
And on this episode of How to Be a Boss, we're talking about how to let them go. You know, sometimes in business and in life, things just don't work out. And it's important to know how and when to let things or people go. And that's what we're going to help y'all with today. So, Chrissy, getting us started, you know, letting people go can be a difficult thing to do sometimes. And how do you prepare yourself for letting someone go?
So I think that it's very important to be clear on the reason why you're letting them go and not be emotional about it, but be strictly logical. So I like to always make like a pro-con list. If they are not helping move us forward with the goal or the mission, then they're in the way. So at that point, I like to figure out, are they being detrimental to the mission? So are they moving us backwards, or are they just like pumping the brakes? So if somebody's just pumping the brakes, before just saying, hey, you're gone, I like to make sure that we've done everything that we can to get them on board. So, you know, having one-on-one meetings, or just being clear about, hey, this is what's expected, this is what you're doing, and this is what we need to do to move forward. If I've already done that and we're just not on the same page, then at that point, I just have the meeting and say, hey, listen, this is what's going on. You know, I wish you the best luck in the future, but this is not working out.
I know those meetings kind of have to be like really uncomfortable, though.
Super uncomfortable. Yes.
How do you prepare mentally for those conversations?
I don't, because the more that you think about it, you start overthinking. And I feel like if I overthink something, then I'm going to second guess my initial decision. And to begin with, that was something that I'm like, oh, they need one more chance or whatever. But as you know, I've been doing this for a while, and I've come to realize that every time I've done that in the past, I have to let them go anyway in the future. So it just prolongs the problem. And, you know, at that point, mentally, I'm like, hey, this is my future. Or, you know, I'm giving up control to them. And I don't ever want to do that in business.
For the record, if y'all hear me like rustling around, I'm sitting in a chair that's kind of making a little bit of noise. So just ignore it. Or I'm adjusting headphones, so there's a lot of background noise going on. But at what point, like, are there moments where you do believe in like showing someone grace, like, hey, you know, you messed up, but I can see that there's still, you know, greater in you? Like, what are those moments like?
Yes. If the pros always outweigh the cons, then we just keep working. Because I feel like, you know, nobody is ever going to be just like the perfect employee, or, you know, nobody's going to be as excited about the mission or the goal as I am. So I take that into consideration first and foremost. I would never expect somebody to just show up every day, you know, in the same frame of mind that I would, where, you know, I'm striving for perfection, if you will. So when the cons start to outweigh the pros, like for instance on our sales team, obviously profit is a big pro. But if the cons start outweighing that profit, then they have to go. They're stopping other people from being profitable. They're hindering the company as a whole from being profitable. So, you know, as long as the pros outweigh the cons, then we keep going, you know, in the right direction. But once they start pumping the brakes or going backwards for an extended period of time, it doesn't help anybody, including them.
So you said, you know, you let people go when they're kind of pumping the brakes, you know, kind of stopping production. when are some other times that you know it's time to let someone go?
So for me, pumping the brakes or going backwards, that doesn't just mean like production for the company. That could mean getting in the way of the vibe of the company. That could mean like creating a wedge in between other employees. Maybe showing up late every single day, always. Robert, I'm just kidding. For the sales team, that one's important. Like, you're there when you need to be there. I don't even consider you late at this point. Like, you start work at 8:45. You're 10 minutes early every day.
We both start work at 8:45. Seth just shows up at 8.
An hour early.
Hey, man.
Yeah, but like if they're just like doing things that hinder the flow of business. So anything where I have to constantly stop and say, okay, we're doing this again, or like, what's up? If I'm having consistent meetings with somebody about the same topic, that shows me they don't care about moving forward. They're stuck. And if they can't get past that, then they got to get out of the way.
And see, now that you done called me out, I have to fix it. I have to start being early now. I was listening to you, but the whole time I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
she keeps record every time.
No, I was joking. I thought that you were like making eye contact. And I'm like, oh, Robert thinks I hit
what
him.
you were saying.
You know,
I was listening to you.
You can carpool with me. I'll get you here early. You know, I'll get you here early.
Seth wakes up at like 6:30 in the morning, and he doesn't have to be at work until 8 o'clock.
The early bird gets the worm.
Exactly.
I ain't that early though. I'll get up after 7.
You're
This
not
morning
trying-
I did.
So you're not
legit,
trying to
like,
get the
oversleep.
worm.
This morning I did legit oversleep. But
Okay.
oh, you just made me lose my question.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, I remember now. Has there ever been like an awkward situation whenever you had to like let someone go? Like I imagine like sometimes when, you know, bosses have to let people go, that's when folks show like their true colors and they like do crazy things.
100%.
Like, have you ever had that?
Yes. So like the thing for me, I can handle most situations when it comes to firing somebody until they start getting emotional. That is so awkward for me because I make it a point to separate out my personal feelings and personal life from business. Like this is strictly a business decision for me. Mm-hmm. And when they start, like I know it's life changing for them, but if I guess I also just don't say, okay, you're done. All of a sudden, like it's you saw this coming. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like you knew long before we had this meeting that this was where we were headed. So like when they start getting emotional in that moment, for me, first off, I think it's so fake in that moment because if you were that wrapped up in what was happening here, you would have got on board with what we were trying to do.
True.
So like that just whole trying to pull at my heartstrings, that's the opposite of what needs to be done in that moment because it doesn't work. I've also had people get really angry, and for me that one is kind of comical because I just don't put up with that. Like control your emotions, friend. So I did have one time I let somebody go because I mean it was just like leading up to that moment they just had a bad attitude. They just were not where they needed to be at you know, in relation to where we were going at the time. So I let them go, and it was raining that day. I remember it just as clear as day. So it's flooding rain outside. She had to walk across the parking lot to her car, and it wasn't even that far, but it was so dramatic. Like we had this big window at our office at the time where we could kind of see everything going on in the parking lot. And I guess maybe she left something behind, but she was just so angry at the moment. Like she turned around, kicked off her flip-flops across the parking lot because it's storming rain, and obviously she's like slipping and stuff, and goes to like charging back towards the door. I just locked it. And she's like beating on the door, like, let me in. I'm like, no, like you need to calm down before you enter this premises again. Like I ended up having to call the police to like escort her in to get whatever it was she had left behind. But it was just so dramatic. And like, it doesn't have to be that way. If you are being let go from a company and there wasn't any like personal craziness going on with like owners or managers prior to that, like you have to realize this is strictly for the benefit of the company and essentially you too. Because if you're not working out with what's happening at that company, you're going to be miserable in that job. It's not, you're constantly going to have this battle. So that's not to say that there aren't other businesses where management or owners are, having this personal thing happening. Because I know that that's the case. I know that there are companies where there's this toxic leadership. And if that's the case, you should fire yourself, honestly, because you don't want to work for a company like that. Like, you can't move forward easily. So I think as an employee, you also have to make that decision. Hey, is this company benefiting me? Are we moving forward, or are we staying still, or are they holding me back? And if that's the case, I think that you should fire the other way around as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's important that we know when it's time to leave a certain position or a certain job. When it starts to affect, your mental health.
Yes.
And you wake up every morning, literally willing to do anything else besides go to work, I think it's time to go.
For sure.
And also, I have somewhat of experience with this because I had a job that I had to walk away from because I almost had the moment that worker had.
Okay. And you were thinking like kicking shoes off?
No, well, what I was going to do was trying to say it without putting too much info out there.
Right.
But in the place that I worked, they had this huge old-fashioned gumball machine.
Okay.
The glass one. And my boss, mind you, I was literally one of the only employees there. My boss low-key tried to accuse me of stealing time. Okay. And me and him have already had issues because I low-key believe that man was bipolar.
Yeah.
Because some days you come in, he's on top of the world, everything's cool. The next hour, the world is ending, and he's cursing people out.
Yeah.
And
toxic.
Yeah. One day he low-key tried to accuse me of stealing time and yelled at me too. That's another big issue. Do not yell at me.
Yeah. Be respectful.
I was ready to walk out, and on my way out, I was going to knock over that gumball machine, but I didn't do it.
Good for you.
I didn't do it. What I did was I resigned. No, I didn't cause any physical damage. What I did was that night, I knew that it was time for me to go. I just put it out there. It was at a radio station.
Okay.
I was running my own show, and also at the same time, I was managing 2 different stations.
Yeah.
And one day, on Sundays, they had pre-recorded services and stuff that would play. And once those ended, I had to go and put it back to the regular scheduled stuff. And one day the manager came in. Mind you, I'm going back and forth between 2 stations.
Right.
One of the stations ended earlier than it normally does. And so I walked in there to change it, and the manager had already did. And I was like, oh, they ended their service or whatever early. He turned around and started yelling and cursing at me. And I was like, oh, no, this is about to be the side of Robert that doesn't come out often. So that night, I went home, calmed down first. I wrote my letter of resignation. In the letter of resignation, and I don't know if this was a good thing to do or not, but I literally laid out every single thought I had about that man, every single thing that happened. And I gave one copy to them, and I sent one copy to the owner of the entire broadcasting company.
Okay.
And it was dramatic because I went there.
Dramatic,
no, it was even more dramatic because I went there at 11 o'clock at night, and it was storming. And I had it in an envelope. I put the office key in there, and I taped it to the front door. And it was very dramatic. But I'm glad that I did it because it also taught me not to let people walk over me, because that was something that I did do. That wasn't the first time he yelled.
So the biggest thing I just got from that story, right? There was a gumball machine at a radio station. Guests just casually walk into the radio station. Why is there a gumball machine there?
Just for the aesthetic purposes of the office.
I was just wondering. Okay.
It was old gum in there. They weren't eating it.
That's a good example of staying somewhere too long. Because if you get that heated, and you're not that type of person. So I know you pretty well at this point. I know that that's not, something that you would just wake up on a Tuesday and do.
No. It was a
Please bear
Sunday.
in mind moving forward that the example I had, she literally would wake up on a Tuesday like that. So, that was just a bad hire on my part. But I feel like if you are not that type of person and you go to a job and it literally makes you act like somebody that you're not, it's time to go.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
been time to go. Like you can't let yourself get to that because really life's too short. And if we have to work, we might as well enjoy it and do something that, is pushing us towards our personal goals or, where we would like to be in the future. So if it's not aligning with that and it's making you stay still or making you go backwards, definitely time to let the company go as well.
Yeah, let the company go and let people go, because sometimes when someone is no longer benefiting your life,
Yes.
it's time to subtract them from it. Like,
Absolutely.
I don't want anybody in my life or in my circle that's not adding to me and I'm not, adding to them. Like,
Yes.
I need it to be a beneficial type deal.
Yes.
But has there ever been a moment where you let someone go and you were like, this might have been a mistake?
Never. Not once ever. So every single time, and I've let people go at work, I've let people go in my personal life and literally just like walk away. Not once have I ever said, oh, my life is worse now that they're not here. So I think that even if you do let somebody go who you're kind of on the fence about, or maybe, you could have worked something out with them, you make it work on the other side of it. And every time I've let somebody go in business, and there's been some very tough ones, but every single time production's gone up afterwards. Even like for the sales team, a top performer, that one's tough. So if it's somebody who is like, doing well or maybe even top of the board at the time, it's hard to put your blinders on and not take that into consideration. But every time that I've had to make that decision, when I look back, I should have done it sooner. It was something that I should have done long before I actually let them go and cut ties with them. So I definitely feel like if it's even a thought, if it's like, hey, this person is not adding to my life or adding to my business or adding to my family, I think you have to just let it go and figure it out on the other side.
Has there ever been a moment where, well, you kind of talked about it a little bit, but can you elaborate a little bit more on a moment where maybe like you knew you needed to let this person go, but you were like,
Yes.
I'm just going to hold on to them just a little bit. Give them one more chance.
Yes. One more chance. Yeah, so we've had, somebody who was like a senior account manager, who really was like a toxic person, not just employee, but person overall. And this is not just one time. This has been several times in the past where, they get to the top of the board because they're good producers and they forget what the vibe is. They forget, what the culture is around the company, and it becomes, a solo show, if you will, where they think that they're the ones that hold all the cards, and this is a team effort. No business can work with just one person for an extended amount of time because you get burnt out. And you need that team to be able to depend on. So when that starts happening, if you've never been through that situation before, it's very, very hard to say, okay, that's it. Like this is the final straw. This is not the way that it can be. It's hard to put your foot down because you're taking the money into consideration. And that might be the case. Like it may be a manager in a company where you're like, okay, this person is toxic and I keep having these recurrent issues, but how am I going to train another manager? How am I going to get somebody else into this position? It's crazy what people do when something gets out of their way. So like employees, they step up automatically. Like if they have an issue with somebody, like if you have an issue with somebody in the company as a leader, other people do too. Like their coworkers are having that same issue, and those employees are relying on you as the leadership, as the owner or the manager, whatever the case may be, to do something about it. So when you do it, they're like, okay, like they got my back. now I'm going to step up and do what I need to do to make this work. So every time that I've ever cut ties with somebody that was hard for me to cut ties with, everybody on our team has just showed out afterwards. So I think that removing that roadblock, removing that obstacle is super important. No matter who or what it is, you got to get it out of the way.
So has there ever been a moment where you knew that it was time for you to walk away from a position or a job? I know for me, like my indicator that it's time for me to leave, I stopped caring about it. Like I stopped, outside of like being 5 or 10 minutes late or something, like I legit do not put in any
Yes.
effort to do what I'm hired to do. It's like I'm there. If the job gets done, great. If it doesn't, I don't care.
Yes. So for me, as I've said in the past, like this is all I know. All right, this is it. I have worked for other companies in our industry, and when I decided to leave those places, it was something where their culture was holding me back. Like I felt like there was more somewhere else that I was not getting in that place. Now, as a business owner, there has also been times where a position that I'm holding at the moment doesn't work for me anymore. And that's never a good thing. So when you are in charge of a business, it's your job to either do the work or delegate. So when I find that I'm having trouble putting my all into something that I'm supposed to be doing, and I just start like putting it to the side or just not caring about it whatsoever, even though it's important to making, the machine work, I have to hire somebody for it. So I fire myself from that position and then we move on. So yeah, when you stop caring about something, you got to do something else. Or find that fire again. Maybe it's something personal that's getting in your way.
So, are there like any steps you would take before walking away from it? Like, kind of reevaluating it?
Yeah. Pro con lists again for yourself. And then also, so if you're an employee and you're having an issue with the business, make sure that you've done everything that you can to get what you need from that company before moving on. Because sometimes there's like a lack of communication that's happening, and it could be an easy fix from a management's perspective that you're not even bringing up, hey, this is an obstacle for me. So just making sure that you've clearly communicated what you need to the appropriate parties. And then, if nothing changes or if you see that it's not a priority for anybody else, but it is for you, definitely start looking elsewhere. But never burn the bridge. That's a good one. Never burn the bridge. I think it's very important that when you leave a company or when you are, ending employment with an employee, so if you're the one doing the letting go, I think it's extremely important to be completely rational and, kicking off the flip-flops in the middle of the parking lot. Obviously, I'm never going to hire you back because you just showed out when it wasn't working. And you never know when you're going to need somebody again. So there's been situations where there are people who have worked for me in the past, and I would never even consider hiring them back again. Never. But they've come to me like, hey, I've done all these things with my life over the last few years, and I want to get back in the game. Like, I don't even respond because the bridge is burnt. So you want to make sure that you always leave on good terms. And if you've communicated what it is that you need, it's really easy for you to say, like, when you do resign, hey, listen, this is why I'm resigning. This is why I'm moving on to something else. I appreciate everything that you've done for me. I wish you the best in the future. I'm moving on. So that's super important too.
So, are there like any examples you'd be willing to give where you, instead of like letting someone go, you walked away from something?
I'm confused by your question.
Because you asked her. Well, I forgot.
Elaborate.
So like you said, is there something that you like start not liking to do or that you feel like it's hindering you, you'll either walk away from it by like putting it out, like hiring someone else to do it for you, or just kind of firing yourself out from it altogether.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be specifically that, but like, what are some instances that you've like, just chosen to walk away from something?
Reception. Hate it. I don't like talking to people. People come in this office, like it literally says no solicitors on the door. And I feel like weekly somebody walks right past that door and is here to sell something. I don't like that. I don't like people like calling me with random stuff all day. So once I found that was something that literally, it got me so heated that it would just stop me and what I'm trying to do for 10 minutes, because I would handle the situation and then I'd be about it. So like when that started happening, when it started being detrimental to me moving forward during the day, I'm like, we just need a gatekeeper. We just need a gatekeeper. Sales was another one. Like I love being on the sales floor. I love their job. Like I love being in the action. Like that's literally why this whole place even got started. But when it came to like expanding the sales team, I could only be back there for so long because there's so many other things that have to be done in a business. I couldn't handle everything. My clients were starting to, see the not the benefits, but they started seeing like where I was kind of letting my sales stuff go, follow up was slipping, and then stuff in the office like admin stuff was slipping too. And when I started having that battle, I'm just like, hey, I got to pick it or choose. I can't do it all. So, choosing to manage the sales floor at that point instead of be on the sales floor, that was a struggle for me, man. It really was. I hated that. But, looking back, that was the best thing because once I got out of the way, everybody stepped up and started producing even more. So,
how long has it been since you've been on the sales floor?
2020. So I did not work on the sales floor for several years. And then we had somebody go on maternity leave who was kind of a vital part of the sales team at the time, or so we thought. So when they, left, I kind of stepped in and was like, hey, I'll just, hold down the fort. And that led to me like falling in love with sales again. And I had to be pried away at that point. Like she came back. And even after that, I stayed back there for a while. But yeah, the end of 2020 was beginning of 21, somewhere up in there. I just came to grips with the fact that that's not where I need to be anymore.
I'm interested in like seeing you on the sales floor. For some reason, like I feel like you can do it, but I just can't picture you like back there with everybody else.
Yeah.
All right. So Robert, other than the one position you walked away from, have you ever walked away from like? Well, I guess you talked about it in past episodes. What are some other instances you walked away from? Stuff that was hindering you, whether it be, jobs or in your personal life.
I have walked away from a few positions, and I'm just now recently open to admitting that I got fired from one, but it wasn't necessarily my fault.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
talk about
here's what had happened. One of the ones I walked away from, of course, I walked away from the radio station. I know you said don't burn bridges. I gladly burned that bridge.
Yeah.
I lit that joker up.
Yeah.
And made sure that there was.
Sometimes that's the way it needs to go.
Yeah, I made sure that there was nothing but ashes left.
Right.
Because I'll go homeless before I go back over there.
Well, sometimes that's the way it does need to be. Like if you know that you never need to go back there.
Yeah.
And that even applies to a person. Like if you want to make sure that person is never an option again, burn the bridge. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. But yeah, don't get me wrong. I still like the job itself. It's just I wouldn't go back. I've forgiven everybody. I let it go, but I won't go back. Another one that I walked away from, I actually used to clean for my church in Fitzgerald. I did that for about 6 or 7 months.
Okay.
But that became too much because it was one person low-key cleaning 2 entire buildings. And one of the buildings was a gymnasium that had like a second floor with classrooms and stuff in it, and it just became too much, and I walked away from that. The one that I got fired from, I actually was not a PRN. It's patient access something or another at the hospital in Tifton.
Okay.
And I was the one that, when people had an appointment, they would come in and I would get them registered and stuff like that. What they did, and it didn't fully make sense to me at the time, was they had one position open, but they hired 2 people.
Okay.
And they were like, we're giving you both, you're both full-time, but we're giving you a 30-day trial period. And after the 30 days, then we'll decide who stays on. At the time, I was having transportation issues because me and my mom were sharing a car, and she worked at night, and I had to be to work at either 8 or 8:30, and she would get off just in enough time for me to get in the car and go to work. And there were some days where she would get off late. Yeah, I think that's the only one that I got technically fired from. And what sucks is that they fired me on my birthday.
Aww.
Oh man, they could have waited.
I wasn't
They
even
could have
upset
waited
about
a
that.
day later.
I wasn't upset about that. Like, I kind of felt like it was coming. What I was upset about was I had just went to the soda machine and got a Pepsi. And I sat it down on my desk, and the manager was like, "Hey, Robert, can we talk to you for a second?" And they walked me upstairs, and I left my Pepsi there. They walked me out the building. I couldn't go back and get it.
That is serious. I think I see both sides of that situation. As a manager, I feel like, if somebody's showing up every day late, regardless of the reason, I try to kind of work around stuff. If I see that, so like in that instance, you being brand new probably didn't help anything because they didn't care. But
No, I was 19 at the time.
oh yeah, so it was probably like, oh, he's just leaving late every day.
So you don't think there was like any type of like communication? Like,
For sure, as a
could've-
manager, I would be like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
They
Like,
didn't.
Why is this an issue for you? And how do we work around it? So, like, if at all possible. So, as an example here, the sales team, no bueno. You need to be in your seat in the meeting room to get the day started at 8:28, not 8:30, not 8:30 and a half, not 8:29 and a half. Like, you need to be ready.
If I was on the sales floor, I would be in this building by like 8:15.
So, like, for you guys, I mean, if 8:30 is a problem and you need 8:35 or 8:45, like, let's just adjust your hours. Like, it's not like you have to be in that moment, like in that place at that time. So if there is a position where there's a reason that this is the hours, there's a reason like you have to be here at this point, obviously that's a little different. But if it's something where like you can still get the job done between 9 and 5 instead of 8 and 4, like, let's just adjust the hours so everybody's happy. And I think in the long run, for me, that's going to relieve a lot of stress because I'm not going to have to fight every day with this person being late. I won't ever have to think about it. And then for that employee, it's going to mean a lot to have that conversation, have the adjustments made, and like they're going to be grateful that you're kind of working with them. So I think that the communication thing there would have definitely helped that situation.
Yeah, there was no communication. I think they chose the other person because she actually lived in town.
Okay.
I had to drive like 20 or 30 minutes to get there. So that was another strike against me.
Yeah.
And I used to tell people, they just didn't choose me. No, they let me go.
Right.
Which I'm okay with. I've accepted it.
Well, that's good. That's good. I think it's also important as an employee that you like recognize where you're at in your career. So like as a 19, 20-year-old kid, you need to know nobody's taking you seriously.
I didn't want to be there.
Yeah, you have to go above and beyond at that point if you want something to kind of prove your worth. I think as you get older, like that kind of changes a little bit. You're taken more seriously because you have a lot of experience. You understand the game a little bit more. So it's super important to know where you're at and where you're going to so that you can let people go and keep people there appropriately.
Yeah, and looking back at it, like in the long run, I'm kind of glad
Hmm.
that I didn't stay there long because that was around the time I also had like my first and only bout with depression, and that
Okay.
was not fun.
Yeah.
And what it was, people coming in sick, and it's like I saw every aspect of it,
Hmm.
and I'm the type of person when I see someone sick or someone feel bad, like it affects me because it's a sympathy thing, I guess.
Yeah.
And I've seen like kids come in with like incurable things, and it just
Yes.
started to get to me and like weigh me down. And I knew that even if they did choose me for that position, I probably wasn't going to be there very long. Mentally, I was not in the mindset to handle it. But I think that's the only job I got technically fired from. The other one was a seasonal job, and the season ended.
Yeah.
Um,
Seth, have you
yeah.
ever been let go?
I haven't.
Have you
No.
walked away from anything?
I guess I technically walked away from Pizza Hut. Like, it was only a summer job. I saw it as a summer job, and like, I didn't work. I didn't like working with food anyway. Like, and then I had a truck at the time, so like, even though I was getting tips, it wasn't. Yeah,
Just
I
didn't align.
never doing
Didn't
it
align.
again.
So, like with your wedding video and photography stuff, like you often hire, you know, I guess you could say assistants or what you call like second shooters and stuff
Hmm.
for different things. Has there ever been a moment where it just wasn't working out and like you had to let someone go and be
Well,
like, hey,
I just started
I don't
hiring
need
second
you?
shooters like last month. Very first time hiring a second shooter, so not yet.
Okay. So I think that when you make good hiring decisions, it eliminates a bunch of firing decisions from having to be made. So as time progresses at AAT, I've found that the better I get at hiring, the less I even have to deal with letting anybody go. So I think, our previous podcast where we talked about making the right decisions, putting the right people in the right places is a super important one so that you don't really have to deal with this topic
Mhm.
that much. So, when you're just trying to fill a position and put, anybody in there just to have somebody there, you're going to constantly have turnover. So when you're a little bit more um, picky about who you're putting in there and you're actually looking for the right person to go in that position and you're not ignoring red flags that clearly show up
Mm-hmm.
in the very beginning, you can kind of mold that person to be exactly what they need to over time instead of having to say, okay, this is just not working out.
So, what advice do you have for someone that has to let someone go, but they might be afraid to, or, just hesitant about it?
Do it. Just do it. Just have the meeting. Plan your work your plan. So figure out exactly why you're letting them go. So with a lot of times that I've had to fire somebody in the past, there has been multiple reasons. And I'm just like, they're doing this and that and this and that. And you can't come into that meeting with all of those things. So you have to calm down and pick a reason. Like pick the most logical reason that has the most examples so that you're not having to explain yourself. You're not having to bring up all of these things and overcome objections from that person. You want to be as clear as possible. So plan all of that out. Make it short, sweet, and to the point. It's super important to not over explain yourself. It's super important to not beat around the bush. So be direct and just say, hey, this is what is happening. We've talked about it in the past. This is what I need to be happening. I'm super sorry. This is not going to work out. Thank you for everything you've done for us. Go get your things. So, like, you don't want to make it a conversation
Mhm.
where they're like, but, or because they will change your mind. If you entertain any of that, they'll change your mind. So just go into it with the bullet points on a piece of paper if you have to, and just say what you got to say and firmly be finished with it and just get it over with. Because I promise on the other side of that meeting, which is tough and it feels like, you can't do it or whatever. On the other side of that, you'll be more productive because you're getting the obstacle out of the way.
I will also say, if you're uncomfortable saying the words "you're fired" to somebody, I have like the perfect thing.
Okay.
There's this person I follow on TikTok. Their TikTok handle is called Mainly Manny, and they have this character literally called Boston CEO.
Yeah.
And she never says, "Oh, you're fired." She'll walk up to somebody and be like, "Young man, your bills have been affected."
So how do you say it? Do you say you're fired, or what do you say?
No, I've never said you're fired. I'll say I'm going to have to let you go. So, like, there's been situations where, somebody just clearly messed up. So, like, with the sales team, we have a phone time policy. If you don't adhere to it, there's, like, consequences. So, there's literally written warnings, suspended for 1 day, suspended for 3 days. So, there's a whole, system. Once you start getting down that system, like, what's fixing to happen. So I just say, hey, this is what just happened again. Because of this policy, I'm going to have to let you go. So it's super important to have policies in your business. So if there is behavior that you see you keep going back to with different people, make a policy that is clear. Hey, this is what you're doing wrong. If you do this, this is what's going to happen. If it keeps happening, you're going to get fired. And when you have those policies in place, it makes it so easy to just be like, you messed up and now you got to go, because they know what's happening. So you don't have to feel bad about it. It's on them.
Yeah, your bills have been affected.
Yeah.
I'm taking that with me. Like, that's one of my favorite sayings.
Say it one more time.
Your bills have been affected. That means you are no longer capable of paying your bills at this job. Your bills have been affected.
Your bills have been affected. Welcome to the party, Seth.
Oh man, I feel like that's not harsh, but it's like
it's savage. I would never say that.
I would say it. Your bills have been affected. If you need help calling your utility folks and explaining, getting an extension, I'd have the numbers lined up already. Call these people. Yeah. Make sure your landlord knows that your bills have been affected.
That's savage.
I feel like that's a little rough.
Yeah.
Just like, I don't know.
That affected Seth.
Yeah, you're no longer capable of paying your bills. I'm sorry.
I feel like I don't know. That is savage.
That is savage.
It's a little bit on the harsh side.
Yeah. We don't do that here.
I feel like I'd rather someone come up to me and be like, "Hey, you're fired." Not, "Oh yeah, your bills have been affected." Like, what?
Just walk up to you. Yeah, you can't pay your rent this month. I'm sorry.
I think the term "fired" is just very harsh in itself, because, like, where did that term even come from? Fired? Like, we just blew up your job, I think just like letting somebody go, hey, this isn't working out. I have to let you walk out the door now. Yeah. Like, I think that's a little bit, softens the blow a little bit.
And then imagine, like, the walk of shame, having to, like, get your stuff and then leave.
Have you ever been escorted out of a building before?
No.
It's very awkward.
Yeah. I think that, like, I get the reason, like, for security purposes, especially in a large corporation, like, I get having to be escorted out of the building. But I think that, like, here, we're like a smaller office. We have like 15 employees. We're kind of a tight-knit group. If I have to let somebody go, I don't do it during the middle of the day. Mm-hmm. Ever. So we're either doing that at the beginning, like when you hit the door, hey, come in here, I need to talk to you real quick. Or I'm waiting till like right before lunch. Or, maybe I call the meeting during lunch and say, hey, can you hang back a minute? Or, at the end of the day, so that it's not awkward for everybody. I think that's embarrassing. Like, I don't want to, it's already bad enough in that moment. Like, I know that this is affecting that person's personal life. So they're going to be concerned about their bills. They're going to be concerned about all of these things. And I'm not going to make that worse than it has to be. So I think that, if you do have to let somebody go, make sure you're not doing it to like embarrass them or, make it awkward, so that when you do have that meeting, they can discreetly get their things. They can discreetly make it out the door without all of these questions or like all these eyes on them. That walk of shame is hard enough.
Yeah, at least at the hospital in Tifton, they could have at least escorted me back to my desk so I could get the Pepsi that I just paid for.
The Pepsi.
I was mad about that. Like, I wasn't mad that they let me go.
You're still mad about that. I can tell.
I was. I am. They owe me.
Robert, you were 19. Let the Pepsi go.
That is
I
true.
moved
That
on to
was
Dr.
like
Pepper now.
Let it go.
that was a third of your life ago.
Yeah.
You should let it go.
Yeah. But just to wrap up this episode, my takeaway from it is, sometimes you do have to make that difficult decision to let somebody go, but you also have to keep in mind that it's for the greater good.
Yes.
It's for the benefit of the company. It's for even possibly the benefit of the other employees' mental health, their production, because you could just have that one apple that's spoiling the whole bunch.
Yes.
And it's better to let them go rather than, just, I don't want to say let them spoil the whole bunch because I don't really like that saying, but it's better to let them go rather than sit and try to force it to work out,
Right.
because it never does.
Never.
Seth, what's your takeaway?
My biggest takeaway was, take your emotions out of it. Evaluate what's going on, communicate it, and if the problem isn't fixed, and at that point you gotta let them go. So yeah.
Chrissy, have you ever been let go from a job?
No. No, I haven't. So y'all know I don't really have a long working history with other companies. Most of my career has been here. So when I was in high school, I, tutored and did babysitting and stuff like that. So, the season just ended for those things. And then right out of school, I got started in this business. I had 2 jobs prior to opening this up. I chose to leave both of them. So fortunately, I have never been let go. However, I think that anybody who has been let go, first off, don't be ashamed of that, because it just happens. It's a business decision. And sometimes in business, things just don't work out and have to go in a different direction. But take it as a learning experience instead of getting emotional about it. Just say, hey, this is why that happened, and then try to avoid that in the future.
Yeah, I think, depending on what you did, maybe you should be a little bit ashamed, depending on why you got fired.
True. That's true. Well, our listeners are not, ratchet people.
No.
Our listeners are career-minded
they're trying to be
people
bosses.
who want to be bosses. So I'd like to think that nobody listening, went crazy on anybody.
Don't get fired for throwing a chair at somebody.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think, my biggest takeaway from this is, sometimes you do have to let people go. And I think that if anything, if you're not in a situation where you are letting somebody go in business, you must also apply these rules to life. So if you have somebody who's a friend, and it could even be a family member who just gets in the way of your peace, and their toxic behavior gets in the way of you progressing or starts pulling you backwards. If they're pumping the brakes or pulling you backwards, they got to go, no matter where it's at.
And I think that is an awesome spot to end the episode. So thank you guys so much for listening. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We are everywhere. Just search Advanced Auto Transfers, and also follow us on YouTube. Same thing. And also AAT TV, where we have This Is the Deal. We have different segments up there. We have our, behind the scenes office shenanigans. If you've missed it, there's a video up there where Seth took some photos and gave it to AI, and it turned into something completely different. Also, we want to hear from you guys. It was a mess. If you haven't seen that video, go look at it. We want to hear from you guys. Be sure to email us at podcast@aat.team. We want to let you ask us questions, send us your comments. We want to have an episode where we literally, just give advice and answer you guys' business questions and even our personal questions that you might have for us. Is there anything else? Did I miss anything? Oh yeah, visit us at autotransfers.com. I feel like I'm missing something. We got the social media, the website. Yeah, I think so.
Did you throw in the ask us questions?
Yes, I literally just did that.
Okay.
Literally just did that. But thank you guys so much for listening. Once again, I am Robert Carden Jr.
I'm Chrissy Brinson.
I'm Seth Sheely, and this was How to Be a Boss.
We'll check you guys out. Check us out next week. Every week I do that. Check us out next week.
Good job, Robert.